Good morning. I'm here with Doug to talk about Zaphod Beeblebrox, among other things. And it is Tuesday, April 22, 2025. And I got a lot of pretty exciting stories. One of the things I decided it was the best this week, or this podcast, was a story that's come out analyzing what's going on with Elon Musk. You wonder, what is he thinking and what is the purpose of Doge? Because obviously it's not what it claims to be. And what they found was Elon Musk has said many times he is driven by what he found in science fiction, and he misunderstood the science fiction, and now the pieces are falling in place for me. There's something I saw him say on Twitter a few years back where he said, when people talk, there should be no sarcasm and no irony. That's just terrible. Nobody should talk that way. And this, I think, is something that is supposedly part of the autism or Asperger's thing, is the failure to understand the subtlety in communication. So he's been reading science fiction and misunderstanding it. And I think it reminds me of Kim.com. Kim.com started Napster to make an incredible amount of money. And he said, the reason I did it is because I watched James Bond movies and I saw those guys like Dr. No with an underground cavern with a swimming pool full of sharks and these women in bikinis. And I said, I got to live like that. I want to live like the villains. And so he said, a seminal moment in his life is when he read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy at age 12. And Zaphod Beeblebrox is the guy who thinks he is the greatest guy in the world. He thinks he's superior to everybody else. And he has this spaceship called the Heart of Gold. And he rescues Arthur Denton. The story goes on. The whole thing was a satire on previous serious science fiction. And Elon didn't get the message. And so he said that he's going to save humanity by moving into Mars. And a ship he makes, the first one is going to be named the Heart of Gold. And he's trying to live out the dream of Zaphod Beeblebrox. And this is tied into the thing now called effective altruism in Silicon Valley, which says the massive reduction in social services he's enacting through Doge is tied to this objective. Although there may be billions of people suffering on planet Earth today, those are minuscule compared to the calculation of the needs of the billions of humans that will one day live if we can gain escape velocity from planet Earth. And that's the math that lies behind Doge. So anyway, it ties into another thing that Elon Musk has said in interviews, which is that he believes the theory that the whole world is a video game and he is the only player character and all the rest of us are non-player characters and we don't matter. And he said that empathy is a virus, and he's trying to eliminate the woke mind virus. And this idea that you should take care of other people is just a complete self-destructive waste of your time. So, anyway, I thought that was pretty illuminating to try to understand what's going on, because it's extremely obvious that the point of MAGA is not to help anybody, but just to hurt people. And
So, so Sam, that's kind of like just thinking about this. Those are anti-Christian values, aren't they?
oh yes, the Christian church has jumped on the Trump train, but that bothered me right from the start. The MAGA has absolutely nothing to do with taking care of the poor. And when strangers travel to your land, you're supposed to be kind to them, and they certainly don't care about that.
Yeah.
I know. I think, when I was a kid, people wondered what was wrong with me because I was the one paying attention to the sermon and reading the Bible and taking it all seriously. And everyone said, "What's wrong with you? This stuff isn't real to you." And I said, "No, I think this stuff is real." Like Elon Musk, I took it all literally. Everyone said, "Oh no, no, you don't actually take it literally." I remember in the book Shogun, the woman starts having a romantic affair with this Christian who is novel there, and she says, "Boy, you fight pretty well. I'm sure glad to see you Christians ignore that thing about not killing. I don't know how you could possibly live without killing. It's good that you just ignore that." And that's how it tends to go. Anyway, I found that helpful. And in similar, you can see it in Alioto. They just had the Supreme Court emergency declaration at 1 a.m. on Saturday that they have to stop sending prisoners to El Salvador. And right at that time, they had another load of them in the bus, and they were driving it to the airport to send them to El Salvador. They told them we're taking you to El Salvador. And when they asked their lawyer in court, "You're not sending anyone to El Salvador like today or tomorrow," he said, the people who spoke to me said they were not aware of any exact plans to ship them out today." And they said, "What about tomorrow?" He says, "Well, I haven't been told quite what to say about tomorrow." That's about as close as he got to say this. And Alioto wrote a dissent saying, well, they told us they wouldn't send anyone out today or tomorrow. And, this is like the other one. He made many rulings that include these statements contrary to fact. Like they ruled about school prayer, and they had photographs of the coach on the field during the game praying with his people. And they said all of his prayers took place in private in the locker room where anyone could clearly um, opt out without being pressured to join in. He put that in the ruling and they knew it was false. And so the point is, they don't care about the truth. What they care about is having a cover story. Like, remember, for about 3 or 4 days, Trump's advisors all said, oh, the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 that we can keep sending people to El Salvador, when they ruled the opposite. Just like the Mueller report. Mueller report came out and Barr said, oh, the Mueller report says you didn't do anything wrong, when it said the opposite. So well, they don't care about the truth. They care about coming up with a story and just throwing it out there. So anyway, it's interesting to watch, and it's it's amazingly close to stuff I stared at, like as a child, cartoons where the villain is just evil, tying the innocent woman to the railroad tracks. These guys are just evil.
Yeah. So, Sam, the guy who was sent to El Salvador,
Yeah.
the one that was claimed to be in a drug gang, but not in a drug gang.
Well, there were several like that, actually. And in fact,
Okay.
they found that 75% of the ones sent there have no criminal record at all. I mean, Trump originally ran campaigning, I'm going to take out like murderers and rapists and stuff. And if he
Right.
did that, probably nobody would mind.
Yeah.
What they did is just like what the U.S. government did in its early days when they wanted to kill off Indians. They're just paying like $10 per scalp and just get anybody that looks about halfway right and send them off to meet the quota.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
That's what we all thought they would do. Just round up anybody with brown skin and say, okay, they're all criminals, get rid of them.
Yeah. So some of them were actually criminals.
Well, that's probably true. As far as the
Okay.
record goes, most of the ones he sent that have criminal records at all have nonviolent criminal records. They've gone, I mean, this is the point. You have to have some kind of hearing or trial where you actually prove that your accusations are true. And that's what the Supreme Court is considering.
I see. Okay.
I mean, otherwise
Okay.
it's the reign of fear. He can send any of us. And he said that many times. He said the guy in El Salvador, build 5 more prisons like that because I'm going to start sending American citizens there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is this is Nazi regime. They want us all to be afraid to do anything. And I must say it's working on my students. They're all afraid to protest or say anything. Um, and that's what they want. That's how they rule. And that's working on U.S. senators. Lisa Murkowski just spilled the beans a couple of days ago. They said, "What should we do if we're afraid?" And she said, "Well, we're all afraid. And if we dare to step out of line, there'll be a terrible backlash on us." So it's a rule by terror
Yeah.
from the
Right.
bottom to the
Right.
top.
Yep. It is. And it's somewhat effective so far.
Well, Machiavelli recommended this as one of my favorite quotes of him. He said, if you're the king and you overcome your weaknesses and become benevolent and kind, then everybody will love you. But that's a whole lot of work. It's a whole lot easier to just make them afraid of you. That'll do.
Yeah.
And anyway, I might as well. Another one I thought was also interestingly on brand is the enhanced games. Have you heard of these?
No.
Okay, this guy in Europe wants to make a version of the Olympics where you're encouraged to take performance-enhancing drugs, the enhanced games.
Oh,
And he
interesting.
said, I've had trouble getting this started, but now that Trump won, this is going to be great. And the Trump family has invested in it. Trump Jr. has invested in it. He said, now we can finally do this. The problem is, of course, he's only got one athlete so far. He says there's a whole lot of real gold medal winners and everything that would like to join. And he said, and they say there's just the end of hypocrisy. They say 44% of the athletes are on drugs anyway. How about we just quit lying about it and take the drugs? And remember the cyclist that did that? He was the number one guy, Lance Armstrong.
Lance Armstrong.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was the number one cyclist in the world. And then it came out that everybody knew that the drugs are
He
so effective, you
he
can't
he
possibly compete with them.
swore he swore for years he wasn't taking drugs.
And that's what you have to say.
Right.
And, this is kind of the Trump brand. He's just blatantly taking bribes, blatantly running
Yeah.
businesses while in office. And he admits all these crimes right openly. That's kind of his whole brand is how about we just start admitting how corrupt we are instead of bothering to even hide it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it makes, I think that makes perfect sense. I think that would totally fit into the Trump aesthetic. It's just have the enhanced games.
Yeah. So, Sam, they have one athlete so far.
So far, because the point is, if anybody actually admits it, then they can never compete in the other ones again.
Well, wait, Sam. I could compete, and I'd be a silver medalist, right?
Well, that's a thought. And I mean, I think this is kind of like an actor deciding to go act in porn. You can make a decision, but you're kind of admitting your career is going to be limited forever.
Well, I can
So
tell you, my career as an Olympic athlete is limited right now.
I agree. I agree. But that's why I'm thinking
But
about,
if I compete,
yeah,
I'm a sure win for at least a silver, right?
well,
I
that's why.
wouldn't even get a bronze right now.
Well, that's true, but it's not happening yet. But that's the point,
Oh,
of course. I like, yep. I mean, it's going to be an option. I just think people have to overcome their ego and accept being like a second rater forever or something. But anyway, this,
I will do that. I
yeah,
could, like I said, and I'll
and good
find
luck.
some sport where I could maybe become like what's that sport?
Tiddlywinks.
Curling.
Oh,
No,
curling.
curling.
Curling looks pretty vigorous.
Yeah, maybe that's too difficult.
Tiddlywinks, maybe. Anyway,
Tiddly. I could get a gold in that. And what performance enhancing drugs would you need? None.
I don't know about that. Anyway,
Or wait, do you have to have proof that
oh,
you're
you don't.
taking
Oh, they
performance
don't. No,
enhancing
they don't
drugs?
force you to apparently, but they would allow you to. Yeah.
Yeah, so I could possibly get a gold, but definitely silver.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the guys that had like legs amputated, and then they got
Yeah,
like springy legs, and they were actually running
yeah,
faster than the other runners. So like the
yeah,
technology was actually making them better at the athletics than they were before.
yeah. There's funny. There's a TED talk about a woman that had the springy legs,
Yeah.
and she was a bilateral amputee when she was about 1 year old, somewhere in there, very young. And she had a congenital defect where she didn't have tibias in either of her legs. And she went on to become a paraplegic athlete.
Yeah.
And she said while she was getting on the bus, to go from the Olympic Village to the racetrack, or the what do you call it? The track
Yeah.
where, yeah, the venue where the Olympics were. She got on the bus first, and she watched as everybody else got on, and they were missing, or maybe, you know, uh, an arm cut at the wrist or
Hmm.
arm cut at the elbow. And she said, wait, this isn't fair. I don't have two legs. Everybody else is missing an arm or, part of an arm. How is this fair?
Yeah, but then she won, I bet, because
No, she
uh,
didn't win. She came
okay,
in
but
dead last.
okay, other people do win because those they get
Yeah, the
good
spring.
springy
Yeah,
legs that are
yeah,
like more effective.
yeah.
Anyway,
But I'll tell you, the moral of the story is she became an athlete. In addition to becoming an athlete, she became a model,
yeah,
and she also became an actress. And without having legs, or without having feet, they could do some special things with her
yeah,
without AI. That was kind of interesting. But the line that I like is that she was in New York at a party with a bunch of models that were there. And she had just returned from England, where she had, I guess that's where the the best prosthetic legs are made. And so she was there, and this woman comes up to her and says, Amy, aren't you like 2, 3 inches taller? And she said, yeah. Isn't it great? I got
yeah,
these different legs, different lengths.
yeah.
And the woman looking at her said, but that's not fair.
That's right. It's not.
So
And
she said, in my entire life, I realized how enabled I am compared to the people who are disabled.
yeah, yeah. And to be
So,
fair, if the technology gets really good, I mean, in China, I've heard there are people that actually try to extend their legs, just add more bone and make them taller. And this is there was a science fiction story about this from Harry Harrison, I forget the name, where he talked about
yeah,
when performance enhancing drugs no longer have serious side effects, then everybody will just start taking them. And this brain implant that Musk wants to put in people. I remember when I first heard of it, I thought that sounds great. How about connecting you to the internet with a computer just built into your brain? If it didn't
Yeah,
have like dangerous side effects, it would just seem like a good idea. So that's why a popular science fiction meme, is in the future everybody will have medical interventions just to improve them, even if you have normal abilities.
right, right,
And
right.
that's why, in a sense, I'm kind of sympathetic to these enhanced games. They're right. If the drugs actually worked, why not? If you could take a pill and it would make you stronger without like doing some kind of damage to your body, that would seem like a fine thing to do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
I mean, yeah. I mean, we kind of have what is that? Unlimited fighting, right? We have boxing, we have wrestling, which is fake.
yeah.
But then there's that cage fighting, which is kind of unlimited. Anything goes to a
And
certain
one
degree,
thing
doesn't
about
it?
the wrestling, even though it's somewhat fake, those guys are real athletes and they get real injuries. They really work
Yeah,
hard to get, and so it's a real athletic event. The competition is kind of rigged, but the actual medical consequences are real.
yeah, yeah. Well, they're yeah, they're athletes in the form that they're like stunt actors,
Well, yeah,
right?
that's right. They're very much like stunt actors, like and shows like the Wild Wild West, they were proud of doing the stunts and they got a lot of injuries. I mean,
Right,
yeah,
right.
I mean, just letting somebody throw you around and smash a table over your head is is one form of athletics. It's
And somebody can miss.
yeah, and the fact, yeah. Anyway, I
Yeah,
got a couple more of these, which are kind of
sure.
fun. There's the Wall Street Journal came out with an article said an even dumber idea than tariffs. And this is impressive. Wall Street Journal has been very, very unhappy with Trump's economic moves for good
Right.
reason. And but they pointed out there's another idea he hasn't yet done, which is the next step. Um, the economics people say what really matters is the cash reserve and the bond imbalance, which is driven by the trade imbalance, and Trump's trying to fix the trade imbalance. And what they say is the next solution is a partial default on treasuries, where you take all the foreign nations that have bought treasury bonds and you arbitrarily take some of the interest you're supposed to pay them and keep it. Say, we're adding a fee. And you know who did this was, I think, Peru or something. There was a Central American country that did this. They just took all the foreign bank accounts and just took like a portion of the money. Oh, we're declaring a tax on your money in our banks. I say, wait, your what? Yeah, your $10,000 just went down to $9,000. Have a good day. I say, wait, what? How does that work? And this would be like the way to put the final nail in the coffin of anybody trusting in the American financial system, which is already in big trouble. Gold is soaring, and T-bills are in their worst condition. I mean, Trump is ending the trust of America's reserve currency, and the idea that's really more likely to happen is he'll fire the head of the Federal Reserve to force him to lower interest rates. And all the commentators I've heard say this is what makes people trust America, is that you cannot use political pressure to directly manipulate the money. That's why our money supply is considered valuable. Otherwise, you've got like a Central American dictatorship like El Salvador, where the leader can just order the money people to print more money,
Yeah,
and that destroys
yeah.
the economy. So anyway, he hasn't done this yet, but from what I understand, Trump is pretty upset and desperate that his financial moves. He said he doesn't want to be the next Herbert Hoover. And it does look like he's going to be the next Herbert Hoover. It's going to be a few months before the consequences of his tariffs hit. And then we're going to have a big recession and maybe something worse. And there's no way
All right.
back. No one's going to trust us for a generation. We broke all our treaties. We betrayed all our allies. We've proven that we're lunatics over here.
True, true. So I got a couple stories for you,
Yeah.
Sam. First, this is kind of interesting. Hertz is using AI to scan rental cars in many cities. Have you heard about this?
AI to do what with the cars?
To do scanning of rental cars before you rent it and before you return the rental car.
Scan it with what? A camera or something?
Yeah, so they've got a camera system that you drive through. It's the company is called UVIEYE,
Hmm.
and you drive through kind of like as you're going through the airport, the TSA, right, through the metal detector or the scanner.
Oh, to look for
It,
like dents or something?
yeah, to look for dents, scratches, and glass. This is kind of interesting. It says that they can look at the tire tread. So if you rent some high performance car and you start doing some road shows and stuff,
Okay.
and this is kind of interesting, undercarriage for damage. And it just takes a few seconds to drive through. And
Oh, well, that makes some
Amazon,
sense. Okay, so it's more thorough than the usual, like a human
yeah,
looks it over.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So, typically right now, if you rent a car, somebody goes out there and you take a couple pictures and before you rent it, and or somebody walks around the car and kind of
Yeah.
marks it. But yeah. So what's interesting is Amazon and GM are already customers who are using it. So we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, one that makes sense. It also makes sense where they have like some to track it, see where you're going and how fast you're going. I don't know if they do that for rental cars, but I know they do that for Amazon delivery vehicles. And it would make sense to do that for any kind of car that you loan to anybody to see what they're doing.
Well, GM is, pardon me, the rental car companies have done that because there are certain areas where if you rent a car that you're prohibited from, or not prohibited, but in the contract you're not able to take it there, and if you do, they can charge you a surcharge.
Wow, I never heard that.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's been going on for at least a decade or
Oh,
more.
where would it be?
I've heard of this in the Northeast. So if you say rent a car from, I don't know, like in New York, and you go into some high crime area,
Wow. Well, then
yeah, yeah,
they would definitely, that's what I wondered. They would definitely have to tell me and mark it on a map or something.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
know.
they
Okay.
do. They tell you in advance, but
Oh,
people
okay.
do it anyway.
Oh,
And so then they've got dinged with, I don't know, a surcharge fee.
well, that makes sense. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense, I guess, in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, speaking of cars, this is kind of where we are in the marketplace. Have you seen copper prices?
I don't know.
So, copper prices have hit, I believe, have relatively all-time high.
Is there
The
some shortage of copper?
I believe that there is a shortage of copper right now. I don't know that this is an all-time high, but copper prices compared to in the past have gone up. So this also includes recycling. So the recyclers are paying a higher premium right now for recycled copper.
Didn't
So
Trump get rid of
last,
the pennies? I think he said we are going to stop making pennies, right?
yeah, but pennies aren't made out of copper.
That's
Or
true. I guess they aren't.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So Oakland DMV copper thieves got onto the roof and they stole copper piping. They took apart the air conditioning system. So when they went to open DMV in the morning, it was raining down because they also cut the water lines. And
Yeah.
so Oakland's DMV was flooded.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it turns out that I guess it would be safe to assume copper thieves did it to Planned Parenthood in Oakland. So they're running around hitting up these different businesses.
Yeah. I guess at a certain point that would be as valuable as like stealing from a bank or something.
Yeah, well, it is. It is. I can tell you in an area of Richmond, El Sobrante, the copper thieves about a year ago climbed up on a telephone pole and they removed about a half mile, give or take, of telephone lines, not high voltage, but telephone lines. So if you're an AT&T internet customer, you're out of service for about 2.5, 3 months.
Man.
I mean, this was to a whole neighborhood. They took
Yeah.
out a section. So that would have been, thousands of homes, not thousands, but probably pretty close to several hundred,
Well,
close to 1,000.
this is another advantage of fiber optics.
If only, if only copper thieves realize that they are fiber.
Well, that's true, but I imagine they would learn to spot the copper, just like everything.
Well, I've seen pictures of electricians that splice copper wire, splice fiber cables together using wire nuts, which is used for copper wire.
Yeah, I don't think that would work.
No, it
You
doesn't. But if
need
you're
a
an
fusion splicer.
electrician,
Yeah, but you don't know what you're doing. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that reminds me, I had a student that actually went to Bahrain and they were setting up radar dishes and they said their boss had no idea what he was doing. And he would take like a whole rack of electronics that was supposed to run at 110 and plug it into 220. And they'd be standing back. He said, "Why are you standing back there?" They say, boss, you really shouldn't do that. And he would keep blowing things up by not knowing what he was doing.
yeah, I've had that happen too, where I've had colleagues and I tell them this is 220
Yeah,
and I say, make sure you read the voltage. And
yeah,
they plug it in, you hear a big pop, and they say, what happened?
yeah, yep, yep, yeah.
All right, what's next on your agenda for
Well, this
today?
one was pretty interesting. So the FBI um, cannot explain what hacking tools they bought, but they have a record that they spent $250,000 to buy hacking tools from the anti-child abuse charity, the Innocent Lives Foundation. And I said, wait a minute, I know that. And that is the one founded by Christopher Hadnagy, who just got canceled and banned from DEF CON for life for being an abusive lunatic. So it's kind of on brand. So it kind of reminds me of the U.S. Army, though. I can't explain where half their money went. The FBI can't say what they bought. And they bought from this very shady, disreputable guy. So anyway, that was it.
Oh no, Sam, that sounds like gosh, that was what, 20 years ago or so? The bomb detector 2000. Do you remember that?
No, I don't know that one.
It was a British guy who claimed to have a dowsing rod and it was able to detect bombs. And so they'd walk around vehicles with these two rods that would point outward, and you put these little cartridges in the bottom, and it would detect drugs, it would detect bombs. And it got so good that even showed that an airplane flying over at 35,000 feet, he could point it at it and it would detect drugs on the airplane.
Well, yeah, this reminds me of the thing Scientologists use to like measure whether there's an alien in your brain. There's like an energy detector.
Yeah. So I mean, that guy, whoever was selling this, sold it, I think, to the Army, FBI,
Yeah.
foreign governments. I mean, he was making tens of millions of dollars on something that he literally bought, at a hardware store for about $20, made this big fancy case for it.
Yeah, I remember there was a guy back when you were running Pacific IT Pros. There was a guy that claimed he was doing network security monitoring, and he turned out to be a total crook and a scam. But his credentials were he sold it to the FBI and trained FBI agents and stuff. It seems like the scam artists go to the FBI and the government agencies as the first people they fool.
Yeah. Well, I remember, shoot, this had to be 20, 30, 40 years ago that when let's see, we kind of talked about this. Somebody supposedly had telekinetic powers and they met,
Uri Geller was one of them.
yeah, Uri Geller, the spoon bender.
Yeah,
He was kind of debunked by James Randi
right. He does a whole lot of them.
yeah, and he kind of disappeared. And I don't know if you know this, but now he's very popular in Israel, or at least in the years
Is he
over the
still
past.
doing the same thing,
Yeah,
pretending it's,
doing the same
oh,
thing, bending spoons.
yeah, well, that's one thing that I think the Trump era of politics has shown is you can just get caught doing something terrible, have a huge scandal, and if you just ignore it, people will just forget, and you can just carry on as if it didn't happen. When I was a kid,
Yep.
you'd have like JFK would get caught cheating on his wife, and that would be it. You're out of it forever. But it's not that way anymore. You can just get
No.
everybody to forget, and pretty soon just carry on with the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
All
would
right.
think
What's
the
next?
internet and everything would mean
Oh,
that the people have a long memory, but that's not what happened. Anyway,
no. People have short memories, right?
yeah, I
And
guess what happened is there's so much stuff happening that everything gets washed out. by the new news.
Yeah, so there's a story that comes out, and you get your people, your army, to create another story.
Yeah.
And isn't that what that movie was with Dustin Hoffman about 20 years ago, Wag the Dog?
Yeah,
Did
that
you?
was one of them. And the other one was Charlie Miller's War, where he
Yeah,
started a war and then he had a drug scandal to cover up the war. So, well, anyway, so Congress is currently again trying to push website blocking laws. They just like they had one before a decade ago. Their new one is called Foreign Anti-Digital Piracy Act, FADPA. And just like previous ones, this would mean that companies can just order internet service providers to black out websites without proving anything first. So it's just a censorship. And so
I
the
see.
EFF is coming out strongly against it and saying we'll have to stop it. They try this every decade or so.
Yeah.
And so Microsoft Recall has come out now. Apparently, I think it's still in like the insider development, but you remember, we tried to bring it out a year ago, and everybody raised huge privacy concerns, and that pretty much killed it. But this is important. Everybody's trying to do the same thing. Apple Intelligence, everyone's trying to find a way to make AI do something that's really cool. And all of the ones that are pushing now involve it knowing everything about you. So it can do something like help you. So Recall is still doing what they did before. It's reading all your emails, all the web pages you go to, every app, screen grabs and everything, making a database of all that information so it can search through it for you. You can say, what was that article I read about last week? So the previous concern was the security of that database. So Microsoft has upgraded the security. For example, it is now encrypted. It used to not be encrypted at all. They just counted on your login. Now you have to have your hard drive encrypted or you can't turn on recall. The most important thing is now you have to opt into recall. It used to be you'd have to opt out. So
Okay.
now it only comes on if you turn it on. Then it records everything you do. But the problem is they said it uses biometric authentication, but that's only true when you first turn it on. After that, you can just type in a PIN. And so the issue is, does somebody know your PIN and can they get on your machine? And of course, if it's just like stolen at the airport, maybe nobody can. But they say, he said, it's still a significant privacy risk in certain situations. And Kevin Bob or Kevin something made this analysis, and he said, don't use it if you're in like a domestic violence or partner control situation, or journalists with confidential sources, or ethnic groups at risk, or the one I like, people crossing boundaries into countries hostile to civil liberties, for example, the United States of America. Um, but because they can force you to give them the PIN. The question is anyone going to find your PIN? And one thing which he didn't research, which I'd like to know, is can I just grab a file and make a brute force pin break? Because breaking a pin is not too hard.
No, but I believe you have 10 shots at typing in the pin.
Well, I wonder because supposedly you can copy the database. And if I can make a copy, then I can do an offline crack and there's no limit. So, but I guess you can only copy once you get in. That's the issue. You have to break through Windows Hello. Okay. Anyway, so it's coming, but they said, of course, all this is probably moot because the fact that it's opt-in means that nobody's going to use it. Only a few people will really turn it on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And uh, and so the real big issue underlying all of this is everybody has invested hundreds of billions of dollars in AI, and they have nothing to show for it. I can't even get people paid $20 a month for Microsoft Copilot. The fact is, there's no product that remotely justifies that investment yet. They're trying to find the killer app. What can AI do that's great that you'll carefully shell out a bunch of money to get? And there's nothing yet.
Everybody's trying to do that.
Well, AI, you know, uh, Bill Gates just came out and said all the jobs in the world are going to be done by AI. There'll only be like 3 jobs left. Everyone thinks AI is going to take over the whole world, including Elon Musk and Doge, right? That's how they're making such a mess of the government. They're using AI to make all these decisions, what programs to cut. By the way, they cut the Internet Archive funding.
They did?
Yep, they cut everything involved from National Endowment for the Arts and the Humanities. They just turned them off halfway through the contract. So the Internet Archive had $345,000 grant, and they just cut it in half. Now, the Internet Archive has another funder to carry them over a gap, and they also killed CISA. CISA's funding ran out last week, which would end the CVE list. and all that.
Ah, oh,
And they finally gave them like an emergency approval on the very last day to extend them temporarily for another 11 months. So they have 11 months to arrange to be privately funded.
huh,
And so, you're turning off all government agencies that do everything. I mean, the medical research, the scientific research, the arts, everything the government does, they want to kill it all. Because in Elon Musk's idea, it's all just a waste. And in Trump's idea, it's all just a waste because it should be 1890, the Gilded Age, where the rich just take everything and the poor get nothing. Why would he ever give any money to the poor people anyway? Bah, they're just scum. They're just a waste of
right.
space.
Yes, yes,
This is an
yes.
old idea. This was the way the whole world worked until socialism came out.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Hmm.
I've got one more, which is actually pretty interesting to me. I hadn't thought of this. So
Okay.
people steal your iPhone. Then, of course, that's annoying. But it's not that bad. You buy a new iPhone, you go to iCloud, you get all your old data and photos and everything. Well, the problem is thieves apparently have learned that that new iPhone is not that useful because it's locked. So they've learned they can extract more value if they learn your passcode. So they try to learn your passcode and steal your phone. And if they do that, then the next step is often to change the password tied to your ID, making it harder to locate. And if they're thorough, they will then create a recovery key. And if they change the password for your iCloud and they create a recovery key, then Apple says that was the account recovery process. You will be locked out of your account permanently. And this happens, and people are suing Apple and complaining, and they're hitting a brick wall saying, nope, there is no way to get at that data. It's still on our servers, but we can't get at it, and you can never get any of your stuff back. And this, I think, is related to that San Bernardino terrorist case where the FBI had a phone from a terrorist that had been killed, and they went to Apple and said, give us the data, and Apple said, no. It's encrypted with a PIN that only that person knew, and without that, there's no way in. That's it.
So, Sam, run this by me again.
Yeah, they
Let's
steal your
go through
phone,
that.
they log in somehow. So somehow they get your PIN.
So they steal your phone.
Right. Now, if they steal your phone and they don't have the PIN, that phone is not worth much. There are people trying to sell these locked phones without the PIN on the internet, and they're not any good. Nobody wants them.
Yeah.
So they get your PIN somehow, and
Ah,
then they
okay.
log in, and now that means they can change your iCloud password to stop you from using Find My Phone to find it.
Okay.
And that makes
Okay.
it then, but then if they then create a recovery key, then there's no way for you to ever get back in, even if you go to Apple with proof that it was your phone, because the recovery key is apparently the process Apple uses to get in.
I see. So that's like the master key for
Apparently.
for for decryption.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't even know there was something called a recovery key, but apparently that is the thing that is uh, that is the way to recover a lost account, as you'd think from
Yeah.
the name.
Well, it sounds like that's the way it's recommended to encrypt hard drives when you're
Yeah,
getting, or sorry, that's the way of decommissioning hard drives
that's
is that
one.
you
Yeah,
encrypt them
yeah.
and you
Then
forget
delete the
the
key.
master key. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how iPhones do it. And
Yeah.
if you and I
Okay.
know if you encrypt your hard drive at Microsoft, I haven't done it, but it used to be they would volunteer to back up the key on a Microsoft server in like your Microsoft Mail account or something for this reason, so you can get back in. So, I mean, there is a
Right.
master key, and so but anyway,
Well,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. The reason that Microsoft did it, and I think it's only for customers or not
$100.
business customers, not
Yeah,
corporate customers,
yeah,
is because consumers would encrypt and
of
then,
course.
yeah,
Yeah,
forget the key or,
and
yeah.
I think this is, but anyway, I don't know if Apple can change this in any way. I would, because the point is well founded. If there was some way for you to get your data back after somebody stole your phone, then the FBI could say, okay, you can do it. Cough over all this data, and all their privacy advertising would be shot. I mean, if they
Right.
want, I mean, basically, if someone
Yeah.
stole your phone and they changed all your passwords, then you're no different than the FBI coming to them with a phone they seized at a crime scene saying, I don't have any of the passwords, but I have the legal authority to see this data. Cough it up.
Right. Right. Right.
So I'm not sure there's any way to fix this, but it does create a new group of people that are out there complaining, saying, hey, I lost all my stuff. And it was, in fact, backed up in iCloud, and I still lost all my stuff. In fact, I was thinking of switching to iCloud for my main backup here because it looked so convenient. And now I'm thinking maybe that's not so wise because somebody can steal
Yeah.
your phone, lock you out of your iCloud, and then all that stuff is gone.
Well, but you could also use, another source for cloud backup.
That's right. And maybe I should, something that doesn't isn't tied through Apple.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I
Anyway,
use OneDrive, which is Microsoft, and I use Apple's
now
iCloud.
right now, OneDrive, is it encrypted with a PIN that only you know? I think it's not. I think if the cops come and want to subpoena OneDrive, they'll just cough it up, right? That Microsoft does have access to all the data.
That I don't know.
Well, I would prefer to have a system where that was true because I'm not a criminal. I don't want to hide the data. I just want it to be available to me.
Yeah, so you could encrypt it, but and to be fair, Microsoft isn't doing a full backup in the cloud.
Right. None of them
So
do. Yeah.
yeah, so what you'd have to do is set up a folder that's
Right.
encrypted.
Right.
Yeah.
Like Dropbox, which is what I used to use years ago.
Yeah, Dropbox. Yeah.
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 Anyway, I know Dropbox has access to all the data. They can recover it and stuff. At least I'm pretty sure they do. I think most of them do. Until Apple started saying they couldn't get in, this was standard. Everybody had a backdoor to get in
Right.
for tech support and for legal requests and stuff. And that would suit me fine. Anyway,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not like, yeah. Anyway, that's all
All
I
right.
got
So
this time.
yeah, I've got one more for you.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Developers of mobile apps have what's called room for improvement in making their platforms fully accessible for disabled users. And there's a company called ArcTouch that reviews all the different apps that are out there for accessibility.
Oh,
And they've only found a couple that are actually out of the sample set that they took that are really helpful or that work well for people with disabilities.
I would think so. Yeah. I mean, that was my problem with phones. Phones are really small and you have to type on that little keyboard. They're pretty hard to use, even if you're not disabled.
Yeah, so I use an iPhone, I use an iPad, and I'll tell you it's frustrating
Yeah.
that a lot of these apps are just in portrait mode.
Yeah.
And on the iPad, it's much easier to have them in landscape mode.
Yeah. I remember when I was a kid, my father was the same. He was just sort of a clumsy oaf and he couldn't use these gadgets. The gadgets are sort of designed for young people with sharp vision and
Yeah,
dexterous fingers. And a lot of us are just sort of like, I can't use the multi-finger gestures on my Mac. Every time I buy a new Mac, I have to figure out how to turn all that off. Every time I'm trying to like scroll through a page, it shrinks everything or blows everything up or does something weird. They have like 10 advanced features. And I just don't want any of it. I want to use one
yeah,
finger so I get
yeah,
the job
yeah,
done.
yeah. Yeah, I run into the same problem. Or you're typing and you actually bump a command key or Windows key, and all of a sudden the screen magnifier goes in, and it's like,
Yeah.
wait, how do you turn that off?
Yeah, that happens to me all the time. Yeah.
Me
It's
too.
and the other thing is when you're in Unix, of course, you type in a script and you hit a funny character that's invisible that breaks your script. That's one of the things I always have to warn students about. And like if you copy and paste anything into Unix, it puts in those advanced typographic characters like a
Right.
wide space or a wide dash that don't work. And it looks good, but it's no good.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of pitfalls.
Yeah. Well, legacy there, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
legacy stuff.
And
Uh,
the generations of hardware. This is why I was talking about boot up viruses recently, and the machines boot up. It's like when humans gestate in the womb. They go through the evolution of computers. First, they boot up in real mode with only 64K of memory, and then they go to another mode and another mode. It's reconstructing the history of computers as they boot up.
yeah, there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
All right, that's it for me this time.
Yep, and me too. So I have another one on Friday.
Very
I think I
good.
will. We are coming up to events like RSA and stuff. The week after that might be trouble. Are you going to RSA?
I could.
Yeah, I'm going to go on Thursday, which is college day. That's when you can go for free.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. There's also B-sides coming up this weekend, but I'm avoiding B-sides. I got COVID twice at it. Both of the B-sides I know are poorly ventilated places, so I'm not inclined to go back there.
Yeah, got it. Got
All
it.
right.
Boy, COVID's kind of making a comeback, huh?
Oh, is it? I didn't know that, but I'm not surprised. It never really went away.
Yeah, I've heard a couple people claim that they have COVID. That doesn't mean that they do, but that's their claim.
Well, it's pretty, yeah, I imagine they do. It's out there.
Yeah,
I'd rather not get it. I had it 4 or 5 times. I don't need to get getting it anymore.
yeah, and I'd say 1% of the people are still wearing masks
I
in the
see
Bay
that.
Area. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
All
Well,
right.
we'll do another on Friday.
Sounds good.